This video contains graphic images of medical procedures and human organs. Viewer discretion is advised.
Sure. My name is Lisa Hinsdale. I'm the manager of organ operations at Gift of Hope Organ and Tissue Donor Network.
According to the United Network for Organ Sharing, or UNOS, organ procurement organizations, also known as OPOs, are nonprofits responsible for coordinating the recovery of organs and tissue from deceased donors in their specific region of the United States.
As the OPO, our role in organ donation is quite a few things. First and foremost, we are the ones who clinically manage the patient, who take care of the donor families, who talk to the donor families about organ donation. We educate the public, educate hospitals, public officials, etc. on organ and tissue transplant as well. As the manager of organ operations, my role is to oversee day-to-day operations with the organ recovery department and the allocation and perfusion department. I'm also the transplant center liaison, so I'm the in-between between the transplant center and the OPO to make sure that we maintain an open line of communication and relationships.
My name is Shannon Wyatt. I'm a donation specialist at Gift of Hope. The best way I explain my job to people is when we get referrals to the hospital for someone that could potentially be eligible to be an organ donor. My job is to meet with families either after their loved one's been declared brain dead or they're going to withdraw life support and offer the gift of donation to them.
We had made it apparent that we wanted to talk to Gift of Hope. And so they brought us into a room, Sam, Cindy, and I into the room. And I remember we met Shannon Wyatt, and we had this immediate connection because she's just so compassionate. And it wasn't like, okay, down to business, here's the clipboard, let's talk. It was like, tell me about Maddie, and it wasn't about the checking the boxes and everything. She was genuinely compassionate.
Yeah.
And she said, well, okay, here's what's gonna happen. They said organ donation, gives you a lot. One of the things it's going to give you is it's going to give you 24 to 48 hours more with Maddie, because they're like, it takes time to go through the process and locate recipients and do all the blood work and schedule these medical teams to come in and do the donation surgery. In the meantime, you've got 24 to 48 peaceful hours with your daughter. We will make sure you have whatever space, time, whatever you need. So you have to go through the whole organ donation checklist, which Shannon was great because she said some of these questions are going to be difficult, but put yourself in the shoes of the recipient. Wouldn't you want to know? So I'm going to ask you questions, she said, that are going to be difficult to ask. We had to go through all that process.
We work with the hospital after the hospital tries endlessly to save the person's life. If that does not happen, then we get introduced to the family to offer them the opportunity for organ and tissue donation.
It's very important that family understand that we are a separate entity from the hospital, that we're a separate organization. We partner with the hospital, but it needs to be separate to prevent conflict of interest, basically.
So the authorization process does look differently if someone is in the registry versus not in the registry. So when a patient signs up to be in the organ and tissue donor registry, they made that decision themselves. So the conversation looks a lot different when we go talk to the donor family. We tell them about their loved one's wishes, how the process is going to look moving forward, and just thank their loved one for signing up to help people. 99% of the time, the families already know that they wanted to be a donor and they're very on board with the process. If someone did not sign up in the registry to be an organ and tissue donor, it doesn't mean that they didn't want to do that. We'll go to the donor family, and that's when we need their permission to move forward with organ and tissue donation. So we have to talk to them about the process, see if this is something that their loved one would have wanted to do and that they would want to fulfill for them. The organ donation process starts when the call comes in from the hospital for us. So they call in our donor resource center and it gets screened for some automatic rule-outs. If it does not meet automatic rule-out criteria, it gets sent to one of our administrators on call, who then sends out one of our organ recovery coordinators to go to the hospital and look through the medical chart to make sure that there's nothing else that would rule out the donor for donation. Organ allocation is really based on 4 different things: blood, and tissue type, because you have to make sure that the donor and the recipient are compatible with one another. Geographic location, because the organs can only stay out of the body for a certain amount of time. Donor size is very important compared to recipient size. And then medical urgency is obviously the biggest factor in organ allocation. The allocation process starts where we take our donor chart and we upload it into UNOS's system called DonorNet.
UNOS is the nonprofit organization contracted by the federal government that manages the National Transplant Waiting List, matching donors to recipients 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. DonorNet is the computerized system that OPOs use to perform a match run, matching each unique organ to the best-suited candidates, and sending automated organ offers to transplant surgeons for acceptance or refusal.
And so that will give the transplant centers all the donors' information so that they can make an informed decision for their recipient. Once we upload all the information into DonorNet, our allocation coordinators run the match runs through DonorNet. And what that means is there's all these algorithms built into the system, and it takes all the donor information and the recipient information, does all these calculations behind the scenes, and then gives you a list of people in ranking order of who should get the organ offer first.
I'm Dr. Yolanda Becker, and I'm a professor of surgery at the University of Chicago, where I'm also the director of kidney and pancreas transplant. I'm also a past president of the United Network for Organ Sharing, or UNOS. Some days I teach students, some days I teach nurses and other physicians. I operate as a surgeon. I do transplants, I do administration, I write papers. So on any given day, it really is a gift. Organ donation is happy and sad. It's sad for the donor family, so happy for the recipients that are awaiting organs. And an organ donor can certainly donate beyond solid organs, can also donate corneas, skin, bone, tissue. In addition, the organs that can be donated include the heart, the lungs, the liver, the pancreas, and the kidneys. All of those are life-saving and life-enhancing organs. The process of getting an organ transplant begins at getting on the transplant list. You must be identified to a transplant center, who then begins the process of evaluation of a recipient. Every organ requires that the patient is evaluated by a medical and a surgical team. They're evaluated by social workers, by dietitians, and they are also seen by pharmacists. Then we all meet together in what's called a multidisciplinary conference, where we discuss the patient, all aspects, not only of whether or not they have end-stage liver disease or kidney disease, that's sort of a given, but we discuss all of those other 5 aspects: medicine, surgery, nutrition, psychosocial issues, and pharmacy issues. The other things that we consider is the patient has to be healthy enough to undergo the operation and everything that comes afterwards. Every different organ has a slightly different turn on a theme. So for instance, in lung, there's a lung allocation score. In liver, there's something called the MELD, where we score how sick a patient is, and the higher the score, the more priority that patient receives.
I'm Dr. Sam Hull, and I am the director of the laboratory Gift of Hope Organ and Tissue Donor Network. Our lab is called the Histocompatibility and Infectious Disease Testing Laboratory. So we do primarily infectious disease testing on all the potential disease organ donors, and also we do what people usually refer as matching. So we match the recipients to the donor for organ transplant purpose.
The donor blood comes in, the recipient's blood is also available. We take the blood of both, we react them together to see if there's a reaction. If there's a reaction of the recipient against the donor, it means that the organ will not function properly because the recipient's body will reject that organ immediately. So we know that that patient can't get the organ, so we move on beyond that.
We have another process called the cross-match. That's when we do kind of the final confirmation that the donor and recipients are compatible. For organ, again, you're transplanting not only the cell component, but it's the whole organ with a lot of different cell types. So the matching piece is very important. Opposed to the tissue side, the tissue, there's not really a matching per se. We just have to ensure that the donated tissues are free of infectious diseases. So when we start the testing, sometimes we don't know whether this donor would become an organ donor, tissue donor, or both. So we do the same set of testing for them, and then it depends on how the case progresses.
So my job is to oversee the tissue staff, and they are the tissue recovery staff that does the tissue procurement for organ and tissue donation for the state of Illinois. They always say that organs is life-saving and tissue is life-enhancing. So it depends, I guess, how you look at things. For me, tissue donation is very important because I personally need an ACL repair. There's so many people out there that need ACL repairs, that need skin grafts. There's so many mastectomies that are happening that people need to have the skin to help with their mastectomy surgeries. There's so many people that can be helped by tissue donation that once you become a tissue donor, you can enhance so many lives with that person, plus all of their loved ones and family and friends around them. The tissues are actually used for back surgeries, dental surgeries, ACL surgeries, and they're more used in like orthopedic office, dentist office. Through the donation process, you can still have a open casket funeral with no issues. Anything that we do regarding tissues with skin or bones, you would not be able to see during a funeral viewing at all. Usually we start with skin. We usually take out heart for heart valves, bones, soft tissues, and then if we're doing veins, we do veins as well. And everything that we take and everything that we do, we make sure that we close the donor. You wouldn't be able to tell that the person was a donor unless you looked at the incisions.
According to the U.S. Health Resources and Services Administration, during organ matching, extensive testing is done to match the donor to the recipient. With tissue matching for donations such as corneas, skin, heart valves, bones, veins, and connective tissue, there is no need to match the donor to the recipient. The only requirement is testing to confirm that the tissue is disease-free. These tissues can be stored for years before transplantation.
People wait for many, many years for kidney transplant, between anywhere from 4 to 8 to 10 years, which is an incredibly long time to be on a dialysis machine where you either have to get 2 needles in your arms 3 times a week, and you sit there for a minimum of 3 hours. All night long the machine cycles. So you truly are hooked to the end of a tube for many, many years. If you can imagine multiplying 6 needle sticks 3 times a week, year upon year upon year. Really, there's so much more to it than the doctoring part. And I always tell patients, I'm humbled to be a surgeon because what I do is just a very short piece of the overall transplant experience. There is all the things that they've suffered in end organ failure up until the point that they get to needing to be on the transplant list. Then there's getting on the transplant list and waiting. Then there's the surgery. With any luck, there's the years afterwards that somebody goes on living now with this new baby with a slightly different metabolism in their body, so they have to reacquaint themselves to their own body, how their own body's going to react to the medication. And while as a surgeon, everybody wants to know about the surgery, where's the incision, how long am I going to be in the hospital, those kinds of things. In point of fact, I'm like, okay, I can tell you those things, but really it's the years afterwards that are really, really important, that you understand you will be seeing a doctor forever, with any luck. Because that's a good thing. That means things are working, we're tweaking, we're trying to make sure that we're balancing out the side effects of the medicines with the good effects of the medicines. So all those kinds of things have to be taken into account. We hope that transplant is a lifelong, with the emphasis on the word long, process for a patient, for a recipient. One kidney donor actually can donate to 2 recipients. The pancreas cures type 1 diabetes, and for those patients that are diabetic that have also been sticking themselves since usually they were children, they are free from that as well. The minute we put the organ in, it starts to work. Certainly for heart, lung, and liver, you can't live without those organs, so people unfortunately do die on the waiting list. There are over 100,000 people on the waiting list. And while we have done record numbers of transplants over the last several years, we still don't have enough organs for patients who require life-enhancing transplant.
So Lutheran General Hospital, as most hospitals in the area, what they do when they have an organ donor who passes, they honor their gifts and they honor their donation by raising a flag in front of the hospital so that everybody who goes by can see. That morning of the flag raising ceremony, we walk out of the room down the hallway and we can hear this dull roar that you can only recognize about 40 or 50 teen and preteen girls make that sound, and that's the sound we heard. And we peeked over the balcony and there were all these people waiting with their Gym Kinetics pink shirts on, and organ donation's a personal decision. So I was going to take a minute and just talk about Maddie's personal decision and our decision. Basically just saying that I think organ donation is heroic, and I think Maddie was a hero and is a hero.
And so then as the time came, a lot of times the organ procurement surgeries are done overnight because they need to have an available OR. So Maddie's surgery, she went down probably about 3 o'clock in the morning. So they prep her to go down for surgery, and we came out of Maddie's room, and just as far as the eye could see, in that long walk to the OR, there were people who had all stopped what they were doing to just stand, and some of them were crying. They didn't know her. It was just amazing.
As I said, she was a hero, and she got sent off like a hero.
The motivation that keeps me awake, knowing that someone is actually waiting at the hospital for the lab to finish up the testing so that they can get a transplant and get a safe transplant. It's not easy to convince people while they're living. It's like, oh, you should sign up on the donor registry, because you're tying that to the death part, right? But it is important to recognize that for whatever reason, if an individual, passes, there's still some ways to continue the legacy of it.
Organ and tissue donation is important because you can truly change the end of someone's story. Life does go on, and it can go on. And to turn someone's tragedy into triumph and to be able to save lives after you're gone is just the best thing you can do.